Good morning guys, I've got an interesting one for you today. So I've got two quite popular 6-cylinder diesel engines right here, both 3 litre or thereabouts, both 6-cylinder, and they are both very popular for engine swaps at the moment. This one is the OM606, which obviously you've seen on our channel and videos. This one here is the BMW M57. This particular model is a BMW M57tu. This one's out of an E60 BMW. So let's go over some of the really obvious differences between these two engines. Now, first of all, one that strikes me as soon as I took this engine and put it on the engine stand is how short it is in comparison to the 606. So the 606 is roughly from the rear of the bell housing to the front of the crankshaft pulley 30.5 inches or thereabouts. I usually say 31 to be on the safe side, but thereabouts. The M57 by comparison is actually much shorter at 27 inches. Now, partially the reason for this is it has a different design on the back of the engine where it doesn't encapsulate any of the flywheel, and the starter motor isn't sort of located into the block like the 606 is. So, you know, you've probably got a couple of inches there, but overall the engine block is shorter. Now, one of the factors for this is the M57 has a longer stroke than the 606. Now we're going to find this out for certain a little bit later because I'm going to strip this down and we're going to have a look at the inside. But that will then allow the pistons to be physically smaller in diameter and overall a shorter engine. So this is a 15-degree tilt. It tilts at 15 degrees, whereas the BMW 20 degrees. So it has quite a lean on there. It's hard to tell because, of course, you can't really get a reference point by looking at it. So that's going to lead me on to my next point. And this is something that I am going to say. Obviously, I am known for doing these Mercedes 606s. So whenever I say anything about an M57, even in a positive way, some guys think that I'm being negative, which I aren't. You know, I am simply stating the differences between one engine and another. Now, I'm sure that many would agree, and I'm not biased in this at all, that this is quite a good looking engine. As far as engines go, it has quite nice smooth looking covers, a nice aluminium manifold. Yes, BMW guys, you know what I'm going to say now, don't you? As I go across here, you're kind of cringing, going, no, don't mention the looks, please don't mention the look of this engine. Yes, it's bad. It is bad. Yes, if this was your child and it was the first day of school, you wouldn't be putting a photo of it on Facebook, would you? No. And partially the reason for this, of course, is its design in that it's common rail. So you're going to have looms on show on top of the engine, which doesn't look as attractive. And they haven't sort of integrated any of that into a cover. Now, I'm not suggesting, because there will be people frantically typing as I say this, the OM608's even worse or just as bad. Yes, I agree, but we're not comparing those two engines. These are the two most popular for conversions at the moment. So we're going to compare these two like for like. So aluminium intake on the 606 is a very nice thing. 605 has a plastic one, but the 606, which everybody uses, aluminium, very nice. The plastic inlet manifold on the M57 is not only ugly, but it's very, very strange. And I'll show you why. If you come around the back. So, if you look at the rear of the 606, the engine, from this angle, the engine is almost like a child's picture of how an engine should work. The air comes in here, you can picture it going down there, into the valve, into the cylinder, and then back out of there, out of that valve and out the exhaust. We can picture that. When we look at the M57, this is its inlet manifold. I know you're thinking which bit. This here, this plastic section, with this tube and this tube, is the inlet manifold. So the air to one set of valves, because obviously 24 valve engine, one set of inlet valves goes in here, down at the bottom, into the cylinder at this angle. The other inlet runner comes over the top, through the rocker cover. Yes, it intakes the air through the plastic rocker cover. So through the plastic inlet manifold, through the plastic rocker cover, and then down into the cylinder head. I'm sure there were very good reasons for this. BMW did put a variable valve, so you had two lengths of runners. So the old-fashioned theory goes, the longer runner, more torque, blah, blah, and all that bullshit. However, do you ever see a long runner on a commercial engine? No, you don't. But yes, I'm sure it does apply to Formula One technology in the 1960s. However, it works, so we can't really say much bad about it. These things do make really big torque, a lot of torque. So let's talk about the plastic, because I've mentioned the plastic a couple of times now. I've mentioned the negative effects of the plastic because obviously the other day I put a post about my thermostat housing cracking and the plastic failing. Now, plastic engine components are going to fail over time. Picture them being like a bowl of oil that's slowly drying up and becoming more brittle as the years go on. That's basically what's happening. And these plastic parts, obviously, as they get older, they're going to break. The good thing is that the plastic parts aren't very expensive. So yes, the thermostat housing that broke on my Discovery, £9, and I could get another one. I'm not going to do that. I'm making a billet replica of it. It's a bit more sexy than just a replica, but I am making a version of it that will replace this plastic nonsense. However, plastic does have some thermal benefits, so we can't avoid that part of the subject. This engine is covered in plastic, yes, because it's cheap, but also because from an inlet manifold point of view, it's quite good. It isn't radiating the heat from the engine into this plastic material and heating up the inlet air as it goes into the cylinder head. So from a performance point of view, assuming that it doesn't crack or leak or there aren't any issues, it's actually it's actually quite useful to have that plastic inlet manifold. Do I like it? No. But if you're a manufacturer, manufacturing something to a low price and also to a high efficiency, they're two pretty big points, aren't they? For us in the aftermarket, when we're wanting to put a nice engine into an engine bay that someone's going to pay a lot of money to install, generally they want something nice to look at. It probably does way higher than the performance gain by having a warm or a cooler inlet manifold. But anyway, so like I say, the plastic parts, they do have benefits. Light and don't transfer the heat. However, fatigue, cracks, and inability to repair them. So let's say that this one gets damaged, we can weld it up, it's aluminium. If we want to modify it, we can chop it and weld to it. It's gash, but it can be done. If you want to powder coat it and make it look nice, you can. So for an aftermarket application, very nice. Plastic you can't really do much to. You've probably seen plastic when it's been primed and painted. It generally looks a dog's dinner, doesn't it? There'll be people typing, some car wings are plastic. I know, but look at the shape of it. It's not like a car wing, is it? So, okay, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get these two engines, I'm going to weigh them on the scale, and we're going to see exactly what the weight difference is between these two versions. But before I do that, I am going to mention one other thing which is very important, is the price. Because lots of people comment on the price difference between 606s and M57s. Well, yes, currently 606s in the UK are hovering around the £1,000 to £2,000 mark, depending on how you're getting them. So there are people on eBay washing them and selling them for £2,000, but there are also some guys that are asking 1,000. Occasionally you'll get them cheaper, 500 quid, but it's pretty rare nowadays. The M57, because there is such a wide range of them, been made for a much longer period of time and been many different variants, these can be had for much cheaper. So the version that's in my Discovery, the smaller bell housing one out of an old E46, 300 quid. You know, they're capable engine, small bell housing, good for Land Rovers because there was a Land Rover application with that small bell housing. This version, the M57tu, has the larger bell housing. This has the big common rail pump on it, so it can make a lot of power. It's got a bigger common rail pump than you would find on the twin turbo versions. Is more expensive because people realise that. You know, this engine cost me, I think, £1,200, something like that, in a car. I couldn't seem to find one cheaper out of a car or in a car, so I just bought a car that was half in bits for 1,200 quid to take the engine out. So price-wise, not much difference. But then when it comes to modifying the engines or getting them into a running vehicle, that's when it becomes, you know, the price gap sort of changes. Because these engines are relatively capable for, you know, 250 to 300 horsepower in standard form with a custom ECU tune. Yes, you're going to have to put some legwork into making a loom or pay for someone to do that. You're probably going to pay £250 to £500 for someone to do the loom and the ECU work if you can't do it. And then it's up to you how many bits and pieces you're going to change, how many bits of old perished plastic you're going to want to replace or risk going down the road. Some guys will get away with not changing any of them and it'll last forever. Or me, on the other hand, everything breaks as soon as I touch it. Whereas 606 costs obviously a bit different. You know, you're going to end up with a big bill for an injector pump to go mechanical. You're over £1,000 straight away. Which is probably more than most things on an M57. And then you're going to have all the usual bits and pieces, you know, to do any perishable items. Generally, the things on the 606, they aren't things like this that are going wrong, you know, plastic components, but they're generally things like tensioners and things like that that need replacing. So not very expensive, but worthwhile doing. And obviously, there's an age difference between the two. This came out in 1998. The oldest versions, and then obviously I think carried on to 2013 as the M57 as we know it. I might be wrong, they probably did go on further than that. The 606, however, the NA version of this was launched end of 93, 94, so it's an older engine, but it only went on till 99, so it had a very short window. There are a lot more M57s out there than 606s, which again probably equates to why this is more valuable than that. Anyway, let's get to some facts and figures, get these things on the scales, and then we'll get that stripped down and have a look inside. We'll compare the bearings, the thicknesses, the weights, the rods, all the bits and pieces, cam lift, you know, valve spring strength. We can do a comparison. Sound good?
Normally it'd have those 10 mils, and then if you look in these holes here, it'd have, if you just have a look in these holes here, it'd have a batch of nuts. By looking at them, I think they're M6, so they would be the 10 mil head too. And there you have it, look at that. So all of the pipe work going to it is totally perished. Look at this. I mean, you just saw that snap off there. But look at the state of that pipe. Now this car has not been in the fire or anything, you can see that from the engine, but now, I know the older version is more like that because I've got one on the Discovery, but this sort of newer style manifold, you see how easily that prized out? If that was an M6 or 8, it wouldn't have prized out that easy. So that's what your injector looks like, an M57tu. It's quite a big thing, isn't it? Got a little, might be a diesel temperature sensor, I would imagine, maybe. And there we have it. One horrible mess of a loom. Horrible because it's dirty, and horrible because there's so much of it.
Hello, it's future me. I've decided that the video that I did record for you, which went through the whole process of stripping the M57, was so boring, I couldn't even bear to edit it. It was like an hour and a half of me going, and this is an injector, and this is how it comes out, and look at the size of this, and this is plastic, and that is crap. And I was like, I can't even bear this. It's almost like my duty to you guys to bring you some decent content and to just keep you awake. For God's sake, you don't want to see someone sat in a chair just talking about fuck all for an hour, do you? So, let's get straight to the point. I've already stripped both these engines, as you can see. And I've made a chart of details just so that we can get to the point quickly. And then I'll tell you my conclusion, what I thought of both. Right then, so the 606 had better cam lift. As you can see down here, we've got our little description. Can you see this clearly? Yeah, are you sure? Okay. So exhaust cam lift, 606, 9.5 versus M57, 7.1. Huge difference there, absolutely huge. Inlet cam lift, 7.8 versus BMW 7.3, not that big a difference. Exhaust valve sizes, same between a 606 and an M57, 26mm. Inlet valve sizes, different. 606 was bigger, 29mm versus 26. Bore and stroke, quite different between the two. 606 is 87 bore, 84 versus 84 bore of the M57, stroke blah blah blah. This was an interesting one. Wall between the cylinders, 10mm on the 606 versus 7mm on the M57. Now then, valve springs. So these valve spring measurements are the stock valve springs. So these are not upgraded or anything. So these are measured on the seat. So the spring as it is squished, sat on the seat. So valve on seat. 52 PSI is a standard 606 inlet versus 49. So it has stronger valve spring on the inlet. 57 on the 606 exhaust seat versus 49 on the M57, so stronger. This really did surprise me. Again, a weak valve spring in a common rail engine that needs a lot of pressure to make power. Don't really get that. So that probably explains why there's like, I googled M57 valve springs and like a million companies came up. I tried to all I wanted to know was, is it a spring from a 335D? Is it a spring from an M50D that you put in? There must be a spring that's available that you can put in rather than go in aftermarket. There must be a stronger equivalent in the range. Couldn't find out any information, just loads of companies selling springs. The weight of the two engines, 227 kilos was the 606, 219 kilos was the M57. So that was interesting. The length overall, so back of crankface to front pulley, 30.5 inches or 775mm is a 606, 27 inches for an M57. So nearly 4 inches, 3.5 inches shorter for the M57, but the weight difference wasn't that different, and it has a lot of plastic components. So my conclusion between the two is pretty much what I expected before I took them apart. The M57 has a longer stroke, it's designed for more torque. It has some really nice beefy connecting rods from the factory, really nice and thick, which I'm impressed with. I like these pistons with the little brass inserts. I think that's quite nice. Quite a nice piece. Apparently there are two different types of pistons, different compression amounts in the M57. I was disappointed by the amount of plastic I found in the engine, which the oil pickup pipe made out of plastic. That disappointed me massively. It does say E60 and E65 on it, so it might only be an E60 thing that has a plastic pickup pipe, but either way, I didn't like that. And the rest of the plastic components, I didn't like either. I didn't like the plastic inlet, I didn't like the plastic rocker cover, but all these components are cheap. And as I did mention in the first video, which I don't know whether you're going to see because it was so boring, plastic is good for a few reasons. Plastic's good because it stops thermal transfer from the head going into the inlet, and if you've got a long runner for a torque, it's going to heat that up like a radiator, and it's going to warm the ingoing air into your engine, which you don't want. So the plastic is good, it's cheap, and for thermal reasons. But from the aftermarket point of view, it's not good because you can't weld to it, paint it, blah, blah, blah. The block on the M57 was is a really nice stout piece. It's really quite similar in many ways to the 606. It has windows above the actual crank. You can see it has windows above. Very similar to the 606, but it's a stocky piece. These sections here, these kind of gussets, do make it quite a stout piece, and with it being a very short engine in comparison, it is quite a stout, sturdy block. We know that they make loads of torque, so we can't say anything negative in that department. They are clearly strong. Very, very good. The 606 really does benefit from rod upgrades, whereas this, the rods, they look pretty stout. The other thing that I'm going to mention before we go is the 2-cylinder heads. So obviously this is M57, this is a 606. The valves were a thinner diameter shaft on the exhaust. Yeah, that's right. So the M57 valves, they had 6mm shafts on inlet and exhaust, whereas the 606 has a 6mm inlet and a 7mm exhaust. Apart from the NA version, which isn't there, both 6mm. And from a port point of view, from a port design point of view, if we're talking about making big horsepower, high RPMs, which is obviously not what the M57 is designed for, the 606 gives it a total whipping. If you look at the actual port design, if you look in the actual inlet ports here, can you see the daylight through? If we just swivel around there, you can see my fingers here, look. That is the inlet port, the air coming straight in. That couldn't be any better. Just try and zoom in on that little. And that is the party piece of the 606. It has such a good design of inlet port. It can flow huge amounts of air. Same with the exhaust. If you look at the exhaust ports, very, very similar. They've got like quite a good flowing design. The exhaust ports can be improved. There is a little improvement can be done on the 606 exhaust ports, but if we look at the M57 head, when we look at the inlet side, even the one that's more of a straight shot, even the one that's a little bit more of a straight shot here, which is the one that comes directly down through the rocker cover, it kind of goes over this awful gusset undulation and round a corner, which is obviously not good for airflow. The one that comes in from the side of the head here, you can't see at all. There's no daylight. It's quite a twisted port. And the exhaust ports, they're a little bit more restricted also. So there is reason for that. Common rail engines, which are direct injection, they require something called swirl. And you often see ports designed to literally twist that air as it goes in, which is fantastic for efficiency and making power at the low end, where you don't need lots of air flow and pressure is more of an additive for power than flow for those engines. But when you're going up to the bigger numbers, the higher horsepower, where you need to flow loads of air, that's a problem. And I don't know whether that head is going to be able to take the port work required to make it flow. You're always better off starting off with something that flows better. So to conclude, it's pretty much what we all expected. The 606 is a high revving machine that can flow loads of air. It does need upgraded connecting rods because they're not particularly strong as standard, and upgraded valve springs, but that's pretty basic stuff. The M57, on the other hand, longer stroke, much more stout, bottom end for low rev, big torque applications, and it's a nice compact design. So if you can bin most of the plastic on the M57, it's going to be a good thing. And the common rail, you can tweak it in ways that you can't tweak the 606. But at the same time, it's not mechanical. And some people love the beauty of the mechanical 606. So take your pick. I like them both. I hope you do. I hope you enjoyed this video and didn't fall asleep. Goodbye for now.